Adrian sent.
Hello everyone and welcome back to a critical retrospective. Yes, I know it's been a really long time, at least a month or so since my last video, which was about Tears of the Kingdom. But I'm back now, and as my Christmas present to you, this video about Marinette, which has been a long time coming, is finally here. If I'm being perfectly honest, I have been kind of afraid to make this video for the longest time, considering how contentious Marinette is in the fanbase. There are tons and tons of people who absolutely despise her to her very core, and yet it seems like there's almost an equal amount of people who will defend her to the ends of the earth. Personally, I don't really know where I stand on Marinette anymore, considering all of the discourse going around. She's got a lot of good stuff going for her, but there's also a lot dragging her down, especially in the more recent seasons. However, I don't want this video to just be a one-stop hate train on Marinette. I'm going to try and take a balanced critique at both sides of Marinette's character, and come to an overall consensus on whether or not I think she's a good character or not right at the end. And boy, is there a lot to go through, considering the fact that she's the main character. I really got my work cut out for me this time. But you know what? This project is important to me, and I know it's important to a lot of you too, so I don't want to keep you waiting anymore. So let's finally answer the question, is Marinette a stalker? Obviously, Marinette's character and all of the controversy surrounding her probably started around Season 1, as all things do. Granted, looking back at Season 1, it's very surreal how different everything is. You can really tell that the writers, and honestly the animators and voice actors, were still just finding their footing with this. This is a phenomenon known as early installment weirdness, and it's a natural kind of stepping stone for every single creative work. No one is going to be 100% on their game as soon as they start. I mean, I know that very well. Looking back at my old videos, ugh. But you know what, maybe I'm being too hard on myself, so maybe I should just move on and talk about Marinette instead of just going on this long spiel about something that doesn't matter. Marinette is probably at her most normal this season, I suppose, but also probably not, considering all the eccentricities. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? At first glance, it seems like I just spouted two completely opposite statements one after another, but let me explain myself. When I say Marinette is probably her most normal this season, I mean that this season focuses more on the more civilian sides of things. Other seasons aren't really afraid to tackle the more fantastical concepts that this show has to offer, and to be fair to Season 1, neither does it. I'm just saying that it seems like the fantastical nature of the show is kind of at its least frequent in this season out of all of them. But I like that, because it means we get to focus more on Marinette's human struggles, the smaller, more domestic problems that she has to face. Chloe being a bully and a brat to her, Alia's friendship with her, her parents and hiding her secrets from them, and of course, her crush on Adrian, which is probably the biggest draw for most people on the show, especially around this time. Personally, I've never really been as into it as other people were. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just not a romance guy. I've always been more drawn to the action and the evil supervillains, you know? So keep that in mind when I critique the romance, because I'm already biased against it. So anyway, Marinette's crush on Adrian. It kind of encourages her to do a lot of terrible things that we all know about. I mean, stealing Adrian's phone just to delete an embarrassing voice message. That's literally a crime, isn't it? I mean, last time I checked it was. And then at the end of the episode, there's no consequences for her actions and she succeeds in her endeavor, which is pretty frustrating if I'm being perfectly honest. Heroes can make mistakes, of course, but as long as they suffer the consequences of their actions so that people know that what they did was wrong. But you know what, I don't want to really get ahead of myself. I'm going to talk more about Marinette's stalkerish tendencies and the crimes that she commits more later in the video. So let's just discuss something else, which is very important about Marinette's character, her insecurities. This is showcased the most in the Origins two-parter. Marinette is clumsy, awkward, and has very little or actually no friends at all. And Chloe is probably the reason for all of that. Apparently Chloe's been in Marinette's class every single year for 3 years. 4 years, sorry. And obviously that's done a number on Marinette's confidence. Being bullied by the same person for years and years, it's a terrible feeling. It makes you wonder if you yourself are even worth anything at all, considering everything that this other person has been telling you and affirming you. And it's even worse if you have no friends who can tell you the actual truth. the truth that you do mean something, the truth that you are valued. I really do appreciate how Chloe has really shaped how Marinette has acted in this episode, and how Ladybug has been her opportunity to rise above that. Just like in the movie, Marinette is very, very insecure about being Ladybug and does not think that she could be up to the task. But then eventually, when all hope is lost, she steps up to the plate because she's the only one who can. It's like that one quote that I'm gonna paraphrase because I have no idea who said it. You'll have no idea how strong you are until you have no other choice. And in this respect, I'd say season 1 is a pretty okay start to Marinette's character. There's not nearly as much terrible things to talk about here, and there's enough really nice stuff that I can meaningfully analyze in an okay amount of time. I understand that this bit has been brief, but it's because it's season 1 and no one likes season 1 that much. Overall, despite the early installment weirdness that season 1 does tend to bring, I'd argue that Marinette is one of the more consistent characters. But let's finally get into the more interesting stuff. The newer seasons, season 2 onwards, which people actually like to analyze, and by that I mean me. Okay, the crown jewel of Miraculous Ladybug, Season 2, the season where most people actually really enjoyed it, myself very much included. This was the season where I was at the absolute peak of my obsession with the show. Granted, I was only 11 years old, so I didn't really have that much else going on, but you know what, that doesn't matter. Focus, me, focus! Season 2 feels like the perfect extension of Season 1. There is a lot more plot going around and way more interesting story beats, but things hadn't worn out this welcome at this point, and so people are a lot more intrigued by what's happening rather than frustrated about how long it's been taking. And that's how I feel with Marinette in this season. I'm glad that we get to know more about her, and her relationship with Adrian is expanded a bit. And honestly, now that I think about it, this might actually just be Marinette's best season. From the top of my head, she doesn't actually commit any serious crimes or be a creepy stalker this season. She and Adrian just have some really nice wholesome moments. You really get the feeling that these two are developing into genuine friends. Let's take the episode Riposte for example. Marinette just joins the fencing school's auditions in order to spend more time with Adrian, which I wouldn't really say that's too out of the question. It's a fairly innocuous quest, all things considered, and it's a very interesting way for Marinette to try and spend more time with him by engaging with things that he likes, showcasing that she does care about him on a personal level. But that's just kind of a superficial example. Let's go a bit deeper, shall we? Her relationship with Chloe. Now, as I've previously stated, we all know that Chloe was Marinette's bully for the longest time, and even still is. Although now Marinette has found ways to deal with her and just sees her as a nuisance to be pitied more than anything. In Queen Wasp, when Chloe becomes Queen Bee, we find out more about her relationship with her mother, which we all know about. Just how horrible Audrey is to her own daughter makes even Marinette start to rethink a few things. And so this makes Marinette want to help Chloe at the end of the episode by reconciling her with her mother. And then in Maledictator, when Adrian expresses very extreme discontent over the fact that Chloe is moving to New York, Marinette starts to see things through a more empathetic lens, which I will get more into in a few minutes. But first, let's discuss where this initially came from, shall we? Well, the episode Despair Bear, if you ask me. This is the episode where Adrian gives Chloe an ultimatum. If she starts being nice to people, then he'll be her friend again, but otherwise, they're no longer friends. I've already talked on and on and on about Chloe's role in this episode, but let's talk about Marinette's in this episode, because this is a video about Marinette. She is hesitant to accept Chloe's niceness, considering the fact that Chloe has put her through a lot of awful things. And to be fair, I can't exactly say that I blame her. If someone was relentlessly bullying me for years and years, then started acting super nice to me, I would at best be confused. But I definitely wouldn't trust them even then, because for too long they haven't given me anything good to latch onto, anything good to remember them by. And so this part of Marinette's character in Despair Bear is very humanizing. It makes me see a lot of myself in her, and I really appreciate that, and I'm sure a lot of other people will appreciate it too. Seeing yourself and your struggles in a character that you have seen, embodying your worries in a more comfortable setting, it's quite liberating. And if I don't fault Marinette at all for the way she feels about Chloe, then her rising above those circumstances and giving Chloe a chance is something I admire more than anything else. As all things do, this brings us to Maledictator. At the start of the episode, Chloe is showcasing just how fabulous she is as Queen Bee and all that, you know, being a show-off. Starts telling lies and being her usual bratty self, and then Marinette tells her off, yells at her, tells her that she doesn't deserve to be a superhero. And personally, while that is a bit mean, it's nothing compared to what Chloe put her through, so I'm not really gonna say too much bad about that. The part that people keep talking about, which I also find the most interesting part of the episode, is the party they throw for Chloe's absence. I used to think that Adrian was the only one in the right in this scene, but I've kind of changed my mind on that. Now I see where both people are coming from. Marinette, of course, has every right to be happy considering the person who put her through so much pain and torment is finally gone out of her life. Adrian, however, doesn't actually have the same experiences, and so whether he likes it or not, he is ignorant to the struggles of the other people in their class. And this is the kind of balancing act that I have to perform for the entire video. I don't want to unfairly slander Marinette for anything that she didn't do, but I also don't want to be too lenient for anything that she has done that's been truly terrible. Which, speaking of, I think it's finally time to talk about... Okay, here we go. It's only fitting that after a really positive section, it's time for a really negative one. It's time to discuss Marinette in Season 3, and the sometimes abysmal showing that she has. Season 3 had a lot of problems, but one of the biggest ones was Marinette's stalkerish tendencies. Honestly, they just... hurt to think about. They hurt so much to think about. I just don't like it very much. Do I sound lost for words? That's because I am. Season 3 Marinette is terrible. And by that I mean the terrible stuff that she does overshadows everything, even the good stuff. I can't remember the good stuff because the bad stuff is so bad. Let's start with the Puppeteer 2, which is towards the end of the season, but it's by far the most infamous. Even setting aside the infamous wax statue scene, Marinette in this episode is just kind of annoying. I understand that they're trying to play up the whole romantic Adrian obsession thing just to a bit of a degree in order to be funny, but it's not really to me. I just find it annoying. Annoying because it's taken so long for Marinette and Adrian to get anywhere. They're no closer to a relationship, and when they do have a relationship, I don't care about it, so you know what, maybe I should just stop complaining about that very specific part and go on to the wax statue scene. Please, somebody out there, find me a person who likes the wax statue scene. I feel like most of the fanbase agrees that this is the cringiest and most uncomfortable scene in the whole show. The way Marinette gets super close and personal with what she thinks is a wax statue of Adrian, the dialogue that makes my skin crawl, all of it perfectly mixes together to create a perfect cacophony of awfulness. Sitting down, watching the Puppeteer 2, and getting to that awful wax statue scene makes me question how all of my life choices have led to this very moment. I could be revising right now, but instead, I'm sitting here, watching this. What's wrong with me? And yes, while the wax statue scene is by far the worst aspect of Marinette in this season, there is other stuff to talk about. The scene in Cat Blanc where she... No, you know what? No, can't talk about it. I can't mention it, I can't say it out loud, I'll just show you a clip.
Adrian's bed. Adrian's scent.
So, yeah, in case you couldn't tell from those clips alone, that was creepy. I feel like now's as good a time as any to look at the definition of stalker. Well, Marinette can't be a stalker clearly, because a stalker is someone who hunts game stealthily, and she's not a fisherman or a deer stalker. Okay, no, it's not that one I'm looking at. I'm looking at the first definition. Someone who harasses or persecutes someone with unwanted or obsessive attention. Now let's see what she did in the Puppeteer 2 again. In the Adrian wax statue scene that we all cringe at every time it's so much as uttered, it's very clear to me at least that Adrian looks very uncomfortable in that scene. I mean seriously, just before Adrian gets kissed by her, the camera flashes to his eyes, which clearly look scared. It makes it seem like the attention that she was giving him in that respect wasn't exactly ideal and wasn't wanted either. And even if it isn't stalkerish, it's definitely creepy as all heck. So either way, Marinette can't wiggle her way out of this one. Plus there's something I forgot to mention in the season 1 section, the fact that she has a timetable of all of Adrian's activities, which I would argue could constitute to her being a stalker, considering the fact that that information wasn't privy to her, and the fact that she's using it to always know where he is and what he's doing at all times, which crosses over into invasion of privacy. However, I am perfectly willing to admit if I'm wrong. If somebody were willing to correct me in the comments, maybe I got something wrong with my definitions, and if so, feel feel free to say so. Besides, the whole point of this video is that it needs to be a balanced critique, right? And if any of you would be able to help make this critique even more balanced, then I'd really appreciate it. Most of the people who did that Marinette poll like a week ago said they were mixed on her after all. Anyway, there is still more to discuss. However, it's only one last thing, so don't worry too much. Party Crasher, the episode where Marinette tries to get into Adrian's house for a party that he's throwing with all the guys. This is pretty creepy. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's just downright weird. Wearing a disguise and tricking people into letting you into your house is a very strange thing to do. Honestly, I do understand what some people say when they recognize the fact that this is a cartoon, it's for kids, and so they're trying to exaggerate it. It's not meant to be taken seriously. I do get it, I really do. However, I still don't like it. Exaggerating your negative behavior just for the funnies? It's not right in my eyes, because it sends the message to the young children watching this that these things are funny, and they're not. They can be really scary for the people being affected by them, so it really should be treated with the seriousness it deserves in my eyes. So let's move on to see how season 4 handles this kind of thing, shall we? As you may or may not be aware, Season 4 is my favourite season, and so that probably already outlines what this section is going to be overall, which is mostly positive, especially with regards to Marinette's character. I alluded to this in the Season 1 section of this video where I said that's where Marinette feels the most human. However, I would also argue that Season 4 does a lot to humanise Marinette, especially at the start. With the episode Gang of Secrets, one of my favourite episodes this season, Marinette breaks down over the stress of being Ladybug and having to hide everything from everyone all the time. Not only that, but now she's the guardian of the Miraculouses, giving her way more responsibility. Way more than a 14-year-old should be reasonably expected to handle. I mean, I was 14 when I first watched this episode, and I definitely couldn't have done what Marinette did. It's honestly really admirable that she managed to do this for so long before finally deciding that it was time to take a rest at the end of this episode and accept help from Alia. There's a sadness that runs through Gang of Secrets because you're powerless to help Marinette with her struggles. I felt really bad for her watching this. She was normally really happy and content, and yet these doubts and worries are finally creeping up on her once and for all. She's been taken prisoner by her own mind, which is a truly terrible feeling to have. You know outwardly that your problems are all just, you know, your own mind. They're just tricks that you're playing on yourself, but you're experiencing them, and so they feel real, which makes them feel eerie, and it makes you feel like a horrible person for not taking them seriously. It's really powerful to see Marinette finally open up to Alia about all of her struggles. That scene at the end of Gang of Secrets is one of the most emotional in the entire show, and Alia truly is one of the best friends ever for that. And after a whole season of Marinette never being wrong in the writer's eyes and the character's eyes, this was really refreshing to see that Marinette can make mistakes. By not trusting in her friends from the get-go, Marinette alienated herself and cost her a lot of damage. However, Alia was there to make things better, because now they can share the secret, which makes things easier for Marinette. Which brings us to Strike Back. Oh my goodness, this was one of the best finales I've ever watched. The cliffhanger was just so engaging. Marinette accidentally losing all of the Miraculouses to Felix's trickery. I was on the edge of my seat when I first watched this, especially considering just how panicked Ladybug looked. I remember feeling, and still feel in fact, really bad for her in that scene. She looked like she was on edge completely and couldn't think clearly due to the high stress of the situation. Your worst fears finally being realized is one of the most horrifying thoughts I could possibly imagine. Marinette having been brought low, cries and cries about how she failed. Ladybug was a paragon of virtue, a symbol of hope in dark times, showing everyone that things can get better. But of course, you can't be that person forever. When all of that pressure lay squarely on your shoulders, all alone, then something has to give. It's mirroring Gang of Secrets. Ladybug had to learn the same lesson that she learned at the start of the season, that you can't rely on yourself all the time, and that it's okay to ask for help from others every once in a while, just to lessen the burden that you have. And I'm not particularly annoyed that she had to learn the same lesson twice, because that's just how life is. Sometimes you think you know more than you actually do. Sometimes people think they've changed when they actually haven't. People mess up. Whether or not they realize it, that's what happens. happens. Marinette gaining more confidence towards the middle of the season after the whole Gang of Secrets debacle is emblematic of how she didn't truly understand what the lesson she learned was. She didn't just need to rely on Alia, but all of her friends. Cat Noir too. He was being neglected because of this insistence that Alia could be the only one who knows. And so in the end, something terrible happens because Marinette didn't realize the gravity of the consequences of this choice that she's made. It's really powerful stuff, and I will always be very grateful to Season 4 for pushing the boundaries of what this show can say. And if I applaud Season 4 for that, then surely Season 5 goes even further with this messaging, right? Let's find out together. Season 5 is by far the season I am the most mixed on. I feel like it does a lot to remedy some of the problems that previous seasons had, but it also introduces a whole host of new ones that I take issue with. And of course, a lot of those problems come down to Marinette. This is the season that pretty much almost completely focuses on the romance between her and Adrien that's been blossoming, which is great for me because you all know how much I love the romance. I mean, Adrien's reciprocation of Marinette's feelings happening at the very last moment like this, the fact that it's not exactly clear when all of this started. Yes, I know that in Determination, Adrien does mention that his feelings for Marinette started around the wax statue scene. I don't understand how that could possibly be the truth, but you know what? Whatever. It's fine. I've lost all of my energy talking about that stupid scene. Let's just see where this romance goes, because even if the setup is a little bit uneven, maybe they can make things work. So, do they? Well, like most things about this season, I am torn. I will say that when they actually do end up getting together, they have nice chemistry. It's pretty clear just how much they care for one another so demonstrably. They're both very kind and affectionate and patient with one another and work through their struggles together. Adrien is very patient with Marinette's emotional outbursts and breakdowns, especially in transmission. That scene did go on for a little bit though, but maybe that's just my opinion. And Marinette's able to help Adrien with his relationship with his father. It seems that the show has finally got to a point where these two truly bring out the best in one another, and that is such a relief, which means we can finally move on from all the unfunny Marinette slapstick. Side note, does anybody else read this blog, or is it just me? Instead of getting a bunch of gags and jokes about how clumsy Marinette is around Adrien, we actually get some really nice scenes where they just act nice and normal to each other. I've been fairly positive so far, but obviously I kind of have to counterbalance that with the mistakes that she's made, don't I? Otherwise I wouldn't be fair. I know that in my Season 5 ranking video I said that Action was the worst episode of Season 5, but I've changed my mind on that recently. I actually think it's Derision. Looking back, I was a bit harsh on Action just for being boring, but I'd rather an episode be boring than be actually frustrating and retcon things in the show. Now, contrary to my first two sentences introducing Derision to this video, I want to tread lightly and carefully when discussing it now, because it tackles some very, very serious topics about mental health, PTSD, trauma, you know, the whole works. And it does end up making me feel very bad for Marinette in this episode, judging by what she's faced, but I do have issues with the writing about how it's handled. This isn't exactly a one-stop hate train for Derision. Even though I do think it's the worst episode of Season 5 now, I'm not going to rant and rave about it. So apparently in that episode, it's revealed that Marinette has trauma from Chloe, Sabrina and Kim pulling a nasty prank on her. Now don't get me wrong, the prank they pulled, it was wrong. It was absolutely wrong. It was downright monstrous of them to do something to someone who didn't deserve it at all. And Marinette's hesitance and tension in the pool and about the pool and everything about the pool date in and of itself wasn't necessarily a bad thing in a vacuum. The problem is how this is completely inconsistent to previous episodes. You'd think Marinette would have a much stronger reaction to be around Chloe and especially Kim, but instead she's remarkably casual around the guy and eventually she just stops dealing with Chloe. It makes it feel like this whole Derision scenario wasn't exactly planned from the start, which it probably wasn't now that I think about it. It feels like it was made to justify Marinette's creepy behavior, which, speaking of which, Marinette's monologue about how after the prank happened, she will never let another boy love her before she knows everything about them. Okay, putting aside what she said for the moment, watching that scene, I could really feel the weight of her words. She sounded really sad, and it made me feel bad for her in a way I can't describe. Christina V is an excellent voice actress. Okay, now that we've discussed that, let's talk about what she said and why it's so terrible. It seems as though Asterix and Co. wanted to justify Marinette's Marinette's creepy behavior through this monologue and through this traumatic backstory. But the problem is that Marinette didn't really show any signs of it beforehand, and plus, you really should justify these kinds of abhorrent acts with this kind of thing. Furthermore, it's a really weird double standard that they've got going on, where Marinette's trauma can justify her bad behavior, but Chloe's can't. And no, I'm not saying that Chloe's behavior should be justified as well. I'm saying that neither Marinette's nor Chloe's behavior should be justified. But anyway, I've already said my piece on Derision previously. All of my opinions on that episode feel pretty much consistent to the way they are now, unlike Action's. Looking back, I'd probably put Derision in last place, and then Action in second to last place, because I still don't really like that episode, believe it or not. The lesson Derision tells is just such a terrible one that I have a hard time understanding why it exists in the first place. The Tumblr blog, The Immaturity of Thomas Astruc, which I mentioned earlier, which I highly recommend by the way. There's something that they said about the lesson in Derision that I found really funny, but also really true. Remember kids, just because bad things happen to you, it doesn't excuse your unflattering actions. Except when it does, and in that case, it's the fault of the person who wronged you in the first place. I'm honestly completely baffled about the hypocrisy of this message. It hurts to think about. I don't understand why and how no one on the writing team could see, hey, are we telling a little bit of a weird story here? But you know what, I've had enough talking about Derision. And I've said my piece on things like Recreation. We all know how terrible that finale was. I want to end this section on a more positive note. A fairly underrated aspect of this season was Marinette's friendship with Kagami, and while I won't talk about it for that long, I do want to mention it at least once. I really love Kagami and Marinette's friendship. Kagami being the more reserved and aloof one, and Marinette getting her to open up a little bit and show her that she is in fact loved is really heartwarming. And that's kind of the whole thing with season 5, isn't it? There's a lot of good stuff with Marinette and a lot of bad stuff dragging it down. The same could be said for the entire show if I'm being honest. Speaking of... This has been a very difficult video for me to make. I've had a lot, and I mean a lot, of mixed feelings about Marinette since the very inception of this series, or at the very least since I started watching it. And all this time I had floating around in the back of my head that I was going to make somebody angry at me from this video, and I really didn't want that. People defending Marinette get chastised for it, and people getting angry at Marinette get chastised for it. Therefore, more than anything else, I wanted this video to be the perfect balance between the two. And honestly, I really hope I succeeded in that. You guys are just gonna have to let me know if I managed to fulfill my promise right at the start of this video in the comment section, because it seems that a lot of you feel the same way I do. Most of the people who did that Marinette poll I did around a week ago said that they were mixed on her character, and honestly, I really wish it wasn't so. I wish I could like this character completely, but unfortunately, there are too many things going against her for me to say that. So let's finally answer the question that probably brought you all here to this video in the first place. Is Marinette a stalker? Well, from my understanding of the word, and from what I've seen in the show thus far, I would say that she was, but isn't anymore. Emotion made it very clear that she's moved on from those weird creepy mannerisms, and despite the fact that it's a lot more tell and way less show than I was expecting, thank goodness they actually decided to address it, however misguided their approach was. Even though Marinette just claims that she's changed, and she did end up stopping the stalkery stuff, they never explicitly said it was morally reprehensible, which they absolutely should have. However, I don't want this video to end on a sour note. Yes, Marinette has a lot, and I do mean a lot of problems surrounding her character and the way she's been written across the show. I feel like it's also very important to highlight the good aspects of this character. Her overcoming her struggles with Chloe, becoming a more confident person overall, seeing how she struggles with being Ladybug and all of the responsibilities that she's showcased, and the fact that around her friends, and even complete strangers, she's a genuinely kind person. When she first met Zoe, she did her absolute best to make her feel welcome. She stood up for her friends on numerous occasions. She even managed to find sympathy for Chloe, her bully, and believed sincerely that she would be able to change her ways. Even if it wasn't her responsibility to change her bully, I appreciate the fact that she had a big heart all the same. And that's what I'm going to try my best to remember going into season 6. I don't think Marinette is a bad person. I think she's complicated, and you know what? Aren't we all?
We got American Idol on PS2. It's $2.99, of course it blew. Karaoke revolution with no microphone, that might be fun. DJ band and guitar hero, just the games, price point zero. Games are games, ignore the fuss. FIFA there and everywhere, 99 cents, that's not even fair. Skylanders, it was just a phrase, I turned these copies into a maze. Lego Dimensions, that really exists? I guarantee you, it was a miss. Games that are the anti-ass. Just take paddleboard, you swine. Play it before it goes offline. Madden 16, 17, 18, not as good as 08, pretty blatantly. But who cares, it's at a great price. Presents that'll make anybody say nice. Gifts with value and some class. It's a bargain in Christmas.